Good deal. All right, welcome virtual meeting attendees as well. We just gone over a question of the day, so I'll get going here on NCITE updates. So if you haven't heard yet, planning professionals receive a free membership in 2023. So we've had 28 planners join to date. Pass that along to any planners you may know. Our call for sponsors ends on Friday. We're looking for platinum, gold, silver, bronze. So if your company would like to sponsor any of these section meetings or the symposium that Joe is planning, there's a link on our website they can go to, or look at your previous emails. Joe mentioned the call for abstracts for the symposium. That'll be held in October. And then this year is NCITE's 60th anniversary. So if there's any ideas to celebrate and incorporate NCITE's history into future meetings or newsletters, reach out to me. We're trying to figure out how to do that. Also, Tom Campbell, on a similar note, he called me yesterday and he has 1970s to 2010s ITE annual meeting attendee bags. Is that right? So Tom, raise your hand here. If you want any of those, he has them in his car, I believe. So
next stop will be
sounds good. Yeah. So he's trying to get rid of them. He's trying to get rid of them. So reach out to him if you want one of those. And some upcoming meetings, April 5th. This meeting's full, but I just put it on here because it's a cool meeting. The traffic ops and maintenance meeting is going to the 3M facility in Maplewood to watch a demo. Apparently they have a new theater, and it has the it can simulate rain on signs and wet reflective products. So should be a cool one. We'll get some pictures from it. April 12th, there's an intersection traffic control committee meeting regarding LPIs, right turn channelization, right turn signal phasing. Caitlin Watruba is the chair for that. She's also the director this year, so she plans all these meetings and she's planning all those meetings. So if anybody wants to co-chair that committee, that'd be great to help her out. Late April, we have a virtual roadshow. That'll be Minot, North Dakota, a topic from Minot, North Dakota. In May, we'll have a Highway 36 and Manning interchange topic for our section meeting. Mid-June, we'll have the Great Lakes annual meeting in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Nick just mentioned that registration opened up. Raise the hands, who's planning to go to that? Not many, okay. July, we'll have a summer social, and then in August, we'll have the International ITE annual meeting in Portland, Oregon. Another raise of hands, who's going to that one? Hopefully more people. All right, not too many, okay. That's all I had for updates. So with that, I will pass it over to Caitlin to give the presenter bios and introduce the presenters.
Great, so thank you all. So today, I am being blinded here. We're gonna have Max, who has worked in the safety section of MnDOT's Office of Transportation Engineering since the summer of 2020, where he works with speed data, crash data, and safety evaluations. Prior to that, he worked in the private sector doing traffic engineering and data work. And then Mark has worked in the MnDOT Office of Traffic Engineering Safety section since early 2020, where his work includes review and selection of HSIP projects, county and statewide safety planning, safety evaluations, and various crash analysis. Prior to joining the safety section, Mark was in another role at MnDOT for about 1.5 years and spent a total of 10 years in consulting. So I will pass it off to one of them.
Let me know if people say they can't hear it. That's me. All right, I was told no one over there could see, so I'm going to stand right here. All right, Max Moreland, MnDOT Office of Traffic Engineering in our safety section. I'm going to talk about some safety evaluations we've done recently. So how we've evaluated the safety of flashing yellow arrows, J-turns, high tension median cable barrier, and then some other evaluations we have ongoing, upcoming. So it's going to be kind of a rapid fire. Just going to go through a bunch of these real quick-ish. First, flashing yellow arrows. Everybody knows what this is. It's a yellow arrow that flashes. So aptly named device. Used for left turn phasing, can provide a little more flexibility than maybe a 3-section head can. The thought is that it might have safer operations because it gives clearer messaging to drivers. Green means go, but not always if you're turning left. So it's very confusing for small children. Green means go, flashing yellow arrow means whoa. Take it easy. So FHWA authorized the use of flashing yellow arrows in 2009. Obviously, a ton of them have been put in throughout the state. These are just the ones on MnDOT intersections since then. About half the ones we have are in the Metro District. So some previous studies have been done on the safety impacts of flashing yellow arrows. Those kind of found two things. Depending on what the signal phasing was before the flashing yellow arrow went in, would tell you what's going to happen to your crashes. So if your previous scenario was just a 3-section fully permissive or a 5-section permissive protective and you went to a flashing yellow arrow, you would see crashes decrease. If you went from a fully protected to a flashing yellow arrow, you would see crashes increase. That kind of makes sense. If you go from a more restrictive, you should only be turning left on green, to giving drivers the option to turn left when there may be oncoming traffic, things are going to happen. When you give people more choices, I guess it's more likely that crashes are going to happen. So what we wanted to do is take a look, see if we're seeing the same or different types of safety impacts in Minnesota. And this evaluation was done by HDR as part of a traffic safety evaluation project we have. So we did our before-after evaluation, looked at 149 signals that had a mix of either permissive, 5-section protected, permissive, or protected. We're switched to a flashing yellow arrow signal head. And these are the results. This is just very high level, a very small subset of the results. I'll tell you where you can get the full report if you're interested. There's a lot more details in there. But the results I'm going to share are going to be in CMFs, crash modification factors, just a reminder, because we all know what that means. CMF is a number, and if it's less than 1, it means your crashes are going to decrease with this treatment. If it's greater than 1, your crashes are going to increase with this treatment. So purple pavement, of course, has a CMF of 0.5. Means if you change your road to purple pavement, your crashes are going to get cut in half. That was a fake example. Turquoise pavement has a CMF of 2. Means your crashes are going to double when you change your road to turquoise. So for left turning crashes, that's the target crash, kind of our focus on the flashing yellow arrow because we're focusing on those left turning vehicles. CMF for that is less than 1 for the when the before condition was the fully permissive or the permissive protected, greater than 1 than if it was fully protected. Again, that makes sense. That's kind of what's been seen elsewhere. If you're going from a less restrictive to a more restrictive signal head, you can expect the crashes to drop. If you're going more restrictive to less restrictive, you can expect crashes to increase. Interestingly, with the 5-section head, operations are kind of similar. You had that protective option, you had the permissive option, but I guess the difference is you're not yielding on green, you're yielding on that flashing yellow arrow. So we are seeing a drop in left turning crashes. So that does seem to indicate maybe is a clear message to drivers out on the roads. I know we hear a lot differently from some people. They complain flashing yellow arrows are confusing, but the crash data seems to show that maybe they are sending a clear message to people out on the roads. And then for fatal and serious injury crashes, we did see drops in CMFs across the board, only statistically significant for the before condition being fully permissive. See those drop pretty significantly, which makes sense if we're seeing a drop in left turning crashes that we'd see a drop in fatal and serious injury crashes. You don't want to be in a crash involving a left turning vehicle. Head on, angle, usually not a good type of crash. So if we see a drop in that, makes sense we're going to see a drop in fatal and serious injury crashes. So that's the quick summary of this evaluation. If you go from fully permissive or protective permissive to flashing yellow arrow, your left turning crashes are likely going to drop at the intersection. You go fully protected to flashing yellow arrow, left turning crashes are probably going to increase. So full report is available. Just Google MnDOT traffic safety reports. Got a web page with every report that we do is on there, and this is one of them. All right, so we're going fast here. Next is J-turns. J-turns, we call them J-turns now, not RCIs, reduced conflict intersections, not R-cuts, not whatever else. All our eggs are in the J-turn basket. So call them a J-turn from wherever you go, because it was getting confusing having all these names for this relatively new intersection. So these are an intersection, accurate intersection type on high-speed multi-lane expressways with wide medians. The goal of a J-turn is to prevent severe angle crashes. So here's an intersection before and after a J-turn was installed. And you can see with the J-turn, there's some obvious differences. As far as the movements that vehicles can make, mainline can still go through without stopping. They can still turn right. They can still turn left. Maybe I should point over here. You guys can see that one. They can still turn left if the left turning bays are provided. They might not be. Some J-turns just have the U-turns. But then minor street, everyone on the minor street has to turn right. So if you want to go to the right, you turn to the right. That makes sense. If you want to go through left, you've got to turn right and then make a J-turn. Turn your head, it looks kind of like a J, the way the line goes. So if you want to go through right, you got to turn right, go to the U-turn, come around. And so the side street traffic is not making those straight through or left movements. So they're not opening themselves up to be T-boned basically by high-speed traffic. You're only dealing with one direction of mainline at a time. It's a little bit easier to do. You do have further to go, but we're seeing kind of on average travel times aren't really changing that much because you don't need that magical gap in both directions of mainline. You just deal with one gap at a time and you can get through pretty smoothly. At the conventional, some people would try and make a two-stage crossing here, but we saw a lot of issues at this. There's a lot happening at that point in the intersection. Sometimes people would hang out a little too far or other vehicles would try and turn, so it's messy. So the J-turns kind of clean that up, simplified a little bit. So these are on high-speed expressway intersections with medians wide enough to fit that U-turn. Alternative to a J-turn would be either side street stop, but that's kind of what we're trying to avoid is the opportunity for those high-speed angle crashes. You could signalize instead of a J-turn, but you still have that opportunity for those high-speed angle crashes. Someone runs a red, that's not good. So that's still a problem crash type. Also with the signal, mainline's going to have to stop some of the time, and we're really only in quote inconveniencing, I guess, a small portion of the traffic that's going through these intersections, some of the side street traffic. So mainline isn't really impacted. The other alternative to a J-turn is an interchange, but that costs a lot of money. That takes a lot more land. You can put 10 or 20 J-turns out for the cost of an interchange. So with the J-turn, we can really get more bang for our buck. Limited funds to go around, so we can put a lot more of these out than just one interchange. So first J-turn in Minnesota was installed in 2010. Now we have over 80 of them on MnDOT roadways. Over 20 were built just last year, kind of all over the state. There's a mix of 3-leg intersections, 4-leg intersections. We do have one that's signalized on Highway 65 in East Bethel, I think. Yes. Signalized, that actually has dual U-turn lanes on it. Some of the J-turns have both of the mainline channelized lefts. Some just have one, some have none. Everyone's got to go to the U-turns. The U-turns can be as close as a few hundred feet. Usually they're 700 or 800 feet away from the minor street. One of them is almost a half mile, just because there's a bridge and some other things. Mainline ADTs that we have these on are, some are just a few thousand, all the way up to over 40,000 on the main line. And side streets are between just a few hundred vehicles a day, all the way up to 7,000 vehicles a day. So there is a wide range of locations that J-turns seem to be operating decently on. So the goal of J-turns is to eliminate those high-speed angle crashes. So the purpose of our evaluations was to see, well, is that happening? Are we seeing less angle crashes? Are we seeing less severe fatal and serious injury crashes? So we did this evaluation in-house in my office. Did 2 types of evaluating on this, before, after, looked at locations that had a J-turn, compared crash rates before and after it was installed, then also took those before, after, and compared it to the cross-sectional, comparing it to some comparison sites that don't have J-turns installed, just other high-speed expressways with side street stop. The results are of our before-after were pretty much the same as our cross-sectional, so I'm just going to share this one result slide. We are seeing statistically significant big decreases in fatal and serious injury crashes, big decreases in angle crashes, and so big decreases in fatal and serious injury angle crashes. So if you remember one thing from anything I say today, angle crashes down 70% with J-turns when we install them. So they're definitely working. They're doing their job out there. Total crashes maybe dropped a little bit, not really. Not a big drop in all your crashes, so it's not going to fix every issue you have out there, but we're seeing more of a severity shift, getting rid of some of these more high severity crashes, and there might be some less severe crashes, which from a safety perspective is okay. So we're still having crashes at J-turns. I just want to talk real quickly about, show you kind of what crashes we are seeing out there. So this would just be a comparison of the crashes from our before-after analysis. On top is the crashes we had in the before period. On the bottom is the number of crashes we had in the after period for just a few crash types. These are just crash counts. This isn't rates, so don't take this as like gospel. This isn't a perfect comparison, but our locations are the same. The time periods before and after are the same, so it just kind of paints a picture of what we're seeing out there. So I said 70% decrease in angle crashes. We're still having 30% of our angle crashes out there, so we're still seeing some. One location we're seeing an increase in angle crashes when we put in the J-turn is this right turn onto the main line. So everyone on the side street has to turn right. There's more volumes, more people are making that movement, so there's going to be more crashes that happen there. So this is one location we're seeing an increase in angle crashes. Another place where we're seeing a decent number of angle crashes is that mainline left turn. So this is, a lot of the J-turns still have these channelized left turns, kind of still opens people up to being hit by a vehicle as they make that left turn movement, similar to the conventional intersection. So seeing similar numbers there. J-turns don't have to have these channelized left turns. It could be eliminated. So you'd eliminate this crash type, and anyone wanting to make a left from the main lane would have to use the U-turn. Slightly more inconvenient. J-turns are sometimes a hard sell for a local community. Even though we have a lot of them and they're working well, it's different. So to get people on board with the J-turn in their community can be a challenge sometimes. So it could be a compromise to keep these left turns in. It have the appearance of less inconvenience for drivers, but it does pose a safety risk. So let's keep that in mind. You can get rid of them all. But the biggest change we're seeing is side street vehicles attempting throughs and lefts nearly eliminated those angle crashes. So in the before period, over 100 crashes of this type. In the same amount of time in the after period at the same locations, we had 2. So people on the minor street at a J-turn are supposed to turn right. Not everybody does. Some will try and take a shortcut, go the wrong way through the left turn. Sometimes people are maybe a little confused about what's going on. So we still do see a couple of crashes of that type. But if you remember one thing, if you remember another thing about what I talk about, it's that we're seeing a near elimination of this type of crash, which is a severe crash. Rear end crashes, similar to angle crashes from people turning right onto the main line. We're seeing an increase in rear end crashes of people turning right onto the main line. Again, more vehicles making that movement. But the biggest location where we're seeing, the biggest crash increase is actually just on the side street. So in the before period, it was 18. After period, it's 51. So this is just vehicles on the side street, no mainline vehicles involved. With the J-turn, you're only dealing with one direction of mainline traffic at a time. So you're maybe less likely to be scanning, looking for gaps in both directions. So it seems more people are just kind of looking downstream, assume the car ahead of them went when they didn't, and then they inch forward and crash into them. So these are all low speed, low severity crashes. So we could have 5,000 of these crashes, and I think it's okay. Because we're getting rid of these crashes. So to get rid of these and have a billion of these, whatever, that's fine. It might make the J-turn sell a little bit harder, but we're not seeing any injuries from this type of a crash. But this is something that's kind of causing maybe our total crashes to not be eliminated or not drop much at the intersection. So summary, angle crashes, fatal and serious injury crashes at J-turns are going down. They're working as expected, which is good. The reports on the same page, just look for MnDOT traffic safety reports. All right, go fast. High tension median cable barriers is the next one I want to talk about. These are barriers made out of cable under high tension in the median. So metal ropes supported by posts in the median. The goal is to prevent those cross median crashes. As of about now, we have 774 miles of these throughout the state on MnDOT roadways. So a lot of them. I'm sure you've seen some of these driving around. So the goal is to prevent cross median crashes. When a vehicle enters the median, that cable barrier is there to stop them from going into oncoming traffic. Those cross median crashes are severe. They're head on, they're high angle, they're high speed crashes. they're never good. So you don't want any of them. So the cable barrier is there to stop that. So when the barrier is there, it'll catch the vehicles before they can enter that oncoming lane. It's a flexible barrier, so it has greater deflection than a rigid concrete or semi-rigid guardrail barrier. So it transfers a little more energy away from the vehicle into the cables. A little bit lower of a severity of type crash when people do hit these barriers. And the cables kind of dig in to the vehicles. They don't just slingshot the cars back into the lane they came from. When a vehicle hits a cable barrier, they're going to get snagged. They're going to get snarled. You can kind of see they'll get stuck in the barrier there. So once they get there, they're generally going to stay there, which is a nuisance, I guess, from a maintenance perspective. There's more work to be done, but it's keeping the vehicle, I guess, in the safest spot right there. So our evaluation, we looked at two things. First was what happens to crash frequency and severity when you put barrier in a median that did not have barrier. So we did just a little before-after evaluation looking at that. And then also what happens to crash frequency when the barrier is in different locations in the median. If it's right up on the shoulder close to the vehicles, if it's way down in the middle of the median further from vehicles. So we did a cross-sectional evaluation comparing locations with different barrier offsets against each other. This evaluation, again, was done by HDR with our traffic safety evaluations contract. We grouped all the crashes into kind of 3 bins, total crashes. So any crash happening on the segment, whether it was related to the barrier or the median or not. Target crashes, these are crashes that involved any vehicle entering or crossing through the median. And then barrier crashes, any crash that involved the vehicle striking the median barrier. So the results of installing new barrier on a location that did not have it before, for total crashes, we're seeing a pretty healthy drop in fatal and serious injury crashes. Same with fatal and all injury crashes. So it does seem that putting in that barrier is going to prevent some of those cross-median severe crashes. Overall, total crashes are going up. CMF's greater than 1. So you're putting something in the median that wasn't there before. There's something for people to crash into. And moths to a flame, people are going to hit it. And so there's going to be more crashes than there were before. So again, that's a nuisance, that's a pain, but we are getting that drop in fatal and serious injury crashes. So everything's a trade-off here. So I guess I'd say it's worth it from that perspective. If we look at just the target crashes, this is just crashes that involve a vehicle going into the median, big drop in fatal and serious injury crashes. So CMF 0.377, that's 62% decrease in fatal and serious injury crashes. So if you drive your vehicle into a median and there's a barrier there, you're 62% less likely to be killed or seriously injured. A big drop in all injury crashes, and again, big increase in all crashes because there's something to hit that wasn't there before. But that's a trade-off we're seeing good drops in fatal and serious injury crashes with these barriers, which is why we have so many miles of them throughout the state. The second portion of our evaluation was looking at how does changing the offset of the barrier, so the distance from the vehicle travel lane, how does that change crash frequency? So we've got 3 lines and 3 equations. Each line is for each equation, because that's how lines and equations work. Total crashes, target crashes, and barrier crashes. So if we just look at this dark blue line, that's total crashes. As the offset increases, the CMF decreases. So as the barrier gets further away from the travel lane, there's less crashes. That seems obvious. We kind of knew that, but now we know kind of how fast that rate changes and the different lines for our different crash types. So now that we know kind of the expected crashes, we can, at different offsets, we can develop CMFs. That's what these equations, this table just has those numbers for it. So we can do comparisons. If we're looking to place the barrier, we can look at different locations in the median, compare estimated crashes at different locations, do a cost-benefit analysis, see what the best spot for putting the barrier would be. So we're just making it more complicated. You just want to put out a barrier. Seems simple, but no, you got to do math. But hopefully this will make it a little bit safer out there, some less crashes, depending on where you want to put the barrier. This evaluation did not analyze slopes, ground slopes of medians or anything like that. Based on the slope of the median, there's only certain places you can put the barrier because it's possible that it's in the wrong spot. A vehicle leaving the road could just shoot right over the barrier or even kind of compress down and go under the barrier, overriding or underriding the barrier. So there's only certain spots you can put a barrier. These calculations can help you pick the best spot and even tell you if it's worth maybe regrading the slopes. It's worth doing that extra work if you're going to see significantly less crashes. This was just a quick example of how to use those numbers. Say you had a barrier that's 10 feet away from one side, 50 feet from the other side, and a 60-foot median on this fake road. You could estimate with that volume, this length of a segment in 10 years, you'd have this many crashes. And if you move the barrier, you can just estimate how many crashes you're going to get. So I'm not going to run through that right now, but you can read about it in the MnDOT Traffic Safety Reports webpage. So that's high tension cable median barriers. Now, just a couple minutes left. I want to talk quickly about some other evaluations that we have ongoing. Just a teaser. I don't have any results, so don't ask me about these. These are things we're working on now, stuff you'll see upcoming in the near future. But hold us accountable because now I've mentioned that we're working on them. First is a bypass lane evaluation. Mara started this, I believe, when she was in our office. Then when she left, then it just gathered dust. So we're going to dust it off and get it out there. What are the crash impacts of bypass lanes? Urban sections. This is kind of a wide-reaching scope of a project, comparing 2, 3, 4-lane undivided and 4-lane divided urban sections, urban facilities. What kind of safety performance are we seeing on these different types of roads in urban areas, with and without head facilities, different speed limits, different ADTs. So it's kind of a messy project, but hopefully we'll get some results out of that. Sinusoidal rumbles. We did an evaluation of rectangular rumbles a few years ago, found CMFs of about 0.7 for rectangular rumbles for vehicles leaving the road either to the right or to the left. So 30% decrease in crashes for vehicles departing their lane when rumbles were installed. We've been putting a lot more sinusoidal rumbles out. Those mumble strips are quieter when the vehicle hits them. So we want to see, now that we have a bunch of them out there, are they as effective as the rectangular rumble strips or not? That one's just getting started. An update to our 55 to 60 mile an hour speed limit evaluation. So between 2015 and 2019, per legislative request, MnDOT studied a whole bunch of 55 mile an hour speed limit roads to see if they should be raised to 60. As you can see, red remained 55, green raised to 60. So thousands of miles of road, we did change the speed limit on. So did a study a few years ago looking at what were the speed impacts. Not much, 85th percentile didn't really change. Average speed changed a little bit. And then what were the crash impacts? They were kind of minimal, but we have more years of data now. COVID happened, so that kind of threw another wrench in everything out there. So we're gonna take another look at that, see how operations are on those roads. Signal backplates with retroreflective borders, the yellow strip on signal heads. 2019 put these out on about 100 MnDOT intersections. FHWA does say that's the proven safety countermeasure. The thinking is it'll just get drivers' attention a little bit more. Say, hey, look at me. There's something up here to pay attention to. So we've had some of those out for a few years. Going to take a look, see if they're working from a crash perspective. Lane constrictors. Put a bunch of these out in 2019 as well. It's on side street stop control intersections. The main line has a little painted buffer, I guess, with some rumble strips down the middle to signal to the drivers on the main line as they enter the intersection that their lane is being constricted. And one of the goals is to kind of get people to try and slow down, improve safety at the intersection. So put a bunch of those out, take a look at that, see how they worked. And then we're going to do an update to J-turns. We have a lot more locations, a lot more years of data. So we'll do an update to that. And that's all I have. Bring Mark up now. I think we'll do questions at the end because TBD on how much time we have here.
All right, so I'm Mark Wagner, and to answer the first question, no, Max and I have not figured out who's taller. I think I'm better looking, but that's more of a personal opinion at this point. All right, so I'm going to cover 5 topics here in about 20 minutes, so this is going to be a little faster. And also, I gave basically the same presentation at TZD, so if you were there and just want to take a 20-minute nap, I won't be offended. So start with our RFBs. This little ham's going to make an appearance throughout the presentation. He's just kind of my fun little character. He's not giving me the finger. He's just trying to walk around. So don't take offense. So I think y'all are pretty familiar with an RFB. This is actually the RFB itself. That bar right between the warning signs has a high frequency flash, their LED indications. They're supposed to make drivers more aware of the pedestrian crossing. They're really intended for uncontrolled marked crosswalks. This is my first foray into animation with PowerPoint slides. So there's more, and it's out of order, but yielding rates, and safety benefits. Pedestrian crashes, according to FHWA, went down after the installation of these. Yielding rates have ranged from 98% to 19%, and of course, that was in Texas. And that also varies by speed limit, number of lanes, time of day, and then the crossing distance too. I've seen RFBs at 5-lane undivided sections. It seems like a horrible application for that technology. These have kind of come from an interim approval that was requested by FDOT back in 2008. And then eventually there was a claim or a patent on the technology, big MUTCD no-no. My understanding is that they vacated IA-11. A private company bought the patent and then vacated it so they could be in the public domain. That's the last I heard. Anyways, RFBs are back in the public domain. They have a new interim approval, and they're probably going to be in the MUTCD soon. But for now, that's the interim approval we're working with. And one of the keys about interim approvals that helps with this evaluation is agencies have to keep a record of locations. So we had 279 of these to pull from. We picked 147 sites for the evaluation. Map, they're kind of all over the state, more concentrated in the metro, but we have a pretty good mix of outstate and urban areas. Control sites, tried to match the same number, really similar characteristics. One of the keys were, intersection type where applicable, and then the presence of pedestrian signing and markings. So we wanted to compare these not to totally unmarked crossings or unsigned crossings, but ones where I guess the signing and markings are there, but not the RFB. So some of the crash data, we just used a 300-foot buffer around intersections. One of the curses of that is that we grabbed some crashes that were in parking lots or on the interstate. Obviously, there are no RFBs on interstates. So after we screened those out, we had about 8,000 crashes left to pull from. That doesn't look like a before-after picture that means much, but that's OpenAI's best interpretation of before or after road construction that I could get. So that location doesn't actually exist. It's only from the internet. Just thought it was kind of fun to add. But the biggest finding was that at the treatment sites, fatal crashes went down by 67%. And that's all users, not just pedestrians. Seems weird that, we would include all users, but that's what happened. Bike crashes were the only statistically significant finding, though, or statistically significant reduction, I should say. Those went down by 62% compared to 47% at the control sites. That's another OpenAI image of a bike crash. So let's move on to PHBs. That's down in Red Wing, I think, on Highway 61. So these are more for the high volume, uncontrolled intersections. They're intended for mid-block. They get used at intersections sometimes. It's a debate going on constantly among traffic engineers about that. They have this upside down triangle of indications, 2 reds on top, 1 yellow on the bottom. And they're really good for high speed locations with few gaps for pedestrians to cross. Some safety findings, total crashes and KNA crashes went down by 29% according to FHWA. And then you saw a 55% reduction in pedestrian crashes. And here, they're really effective at multi-lane crossings where the speed limit is greater than 35 miles an hour. Kind of the same story with PHBs that we did with RFBs. We took all the sites we could find in the state, pulled crash data, and then we tried to match treatments or control sites as closely as possible. We ended up with actually 8,000, so we used the same pool of crashes. I kind of brushed over that the first time, but we just grabbed RFBs and PHB sites in the same data set, separated them out later. And then we omitted the year of installation also. There's no need to include those crashes in the before and after analysis. So here's kind of some of the results. I think the most interesting one here is minor injury crashes at the treatment sites went down by about half, and at the control sites didn't change at all. So, and then this is just a summary of what was statistically significant again. The weirdest one was rear end crashes went down by more at the treatment sites, which, you know, usually you install a signal, you expect to see rear end crashes kind of jump a little bit. I thought it'd be the same for hybrid beacons. Not in our study, still could be. So, pedestrian and bike safety at roundabouts. I included this for TZD. Don't take it personally. You all know what a roundabout is versus a traffic circle. So national research, these are the two that I like to go to a lot, NCHRP 672 and the Highway Safety Manual. Both of these found really large reductions, almost 80% in fatal and serious injury crashes. And then that says injury crashes, but you know, if a pedestrian gets hit, it's probably going to be more on the serious side anyways. Derek Lord did these two things. This was MnDOT's first foray into a big roundabout study, I would say. He found 86% reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes in his study at all the roundabouts at the time that were installed in the state. And no multi-vehicle fatals, which I think to this day is still true at all the roundabouts. But the one thing it didn't really look at, he tried in this addendum to look at ped and bike crashes, but he grabbed all the sites, whether they have peg crossings or not. So it was a little kind of a shotgun approach. And here's some LRRB papers about pedestrian safety at roundabouts. These had more mixed results because they looked more at the personal level of what pedestrians experience when they try to cross at a roundabout. And there's still, I think, some issues with comfort level. And I think a lot of that comes down to a perception that a roundabout just has a yield sign, whereas a signal has the hand in walking man. It tells someone when they're supposed to stop. It tells them when they're supposed to walk. It's very clear what everyone's supposed to do, whether they follow all that or not. And then the stop sign is the stop sign. Everyone thinks they work 100% of the time. So some things I wanted to look at were, is this an accurate perception? I wanted to focus more on urban roundabouts where we expect to see more users. And then I started this in 2020, but then as COVID went on and pedestrian crashes kind of jumped, it got really interesting to see what was happening at roundabouts versus other locations too. Oh, and then exposure, which gets me to my digression about space. This is Eric DeVos' slide. I can't take credit for it. Basically, it uses, and thankfully Sonia's here too. Yep, I know. There's 19 factors, and I think they all get scored 0 or 1, don't they? Okay, so either a site has them or it doesn't. And then based on these factors, every kind of like hexagon, the state's divided into like 500,000 hexagons. Each hexagon gets a space score based on these criteria. It's out of 100. Like over 50 is a high score where you're going to see probably more pedestrian and bike activity. And then below 50, not a reason not to do something, but also you're probably not going to see as much activity in those areas. And here's one of the fun kind of counterintuitive things. If you're scoping a project, you'd think Mankato's where you want to go for peds and bikes. It's got the most people. Space would tell you that you might want to spend more time in Faribault, actually. That's where more of the factors are present that are going to contribute to ped and bike usage, and maybe more treatments are needed there. So back to the study, data collection. There's a map of all the roundabout sites. Again, it got heavily concentrated in the metro. I think that's just where most of the roundabouts are. I went all the way back to the 90s for my crash data, which was kind of a throwback jam. It's fun. And then I grabbed volumes, crashes, space, scores, and then site characteristics for all of them. Traffic, and then the control sites, I did traffic signals, through stops, and all-way stops. Selected them based on, I tried to match locations and volumes when I was selecting control sites, at least for the signals. That's a harder job to do with stop control sites. We had to limit it to basically the 4 largest highways in the state because I'm not a crazy person. I don't want to look at MSAS routes to try to figure out or find treatment or control sites for through stops. Summary of findings. Okay, well, okay on time. Before, after for all crashes, pretty good. Just like Derek, I saw about a 60% reduction in K&A crashes at my sites. 44% increase in PDL crashes and a small increase in total crashes. But like Max said with his J-term presentation, I'll take 1,000 of these instead of 1 fatal at any intersection. And then before after for pedestrians, very good numbers. I put NA down there for the K because honestly it was 0 to 1. It feels weird to put 100% increase in there. But otherwise, generally reductions. Bikes looked pretty good, but there was that spike in B crashes, which is a little concerning. Means bikers might be more likely to break an arm in a roundabout. So a couple of comparisons. Michael Scott doesn't think this is that bad. Single lanes, which is this light green line on the left, looks pretty good. Multi-lanes look really bad compared to signals. And roundabouts do overall, just I think because it's skewed by the multi-lanes. Compared to the stop controlled intersections, it's not as good. Urban always stops perform very well from a safety standpoint. And that's probably a function of the fact that it is a 4-way stop or 3-way stop. And then total, compared to urban through stops, they did all right, I guess. But roundabouts, and this is just crash rates compared, they look like they're performing a little worse in urban areas overall. So what do these results tell us so far? Generally, installing a roundabout is safer for peds and bikes. K&A crashes go down when you install a roundabout. And then this thankfully is not from Minnesota. There have been still no multi-vehicle fatals at a roundabout in Minnesota. So next steps, space. I'm going to do a little more analysis with that and look at pedestrian exposure. Statistical testing, and then I'm going to write it up in a fancy report. So no, you don't get to go look at it on the traffic safety website right now. I don't have it ready like Max does. And here's where I get at. One of these four things will happen first, either my report, the invention of cold fusion, the heat death of the universe, or MnDOT will be done rethinking I-94. We're not sure which one's coming first at this point. So a couple of transportation research syntheses. These were undertaken along with a rewrite of the guide to establishing speed limits in school zones. They helped inform and guide the production of that guide. Yes, that is the Eye of Mordor. So let's start with school zone speed limits. So basically, what does the current research say? What are the procedures for effective ones? And then are there unintended consequences of school zone speed limits? By state, most states actually had a statutory number, 15, 20, or 25 miles an hour. And then some states allowed you, based on engineering study, to go lower or higher. Minnesota actually has the broadest range. Weirdly enough, it's like, we didn't write it with specific numbers. It's just like, can't be lower than 15 and can't be more than 30 below the speed limit. So theoretically, anywhere from 15 to 40 is possible. Speed reductions, they did see a statistically significant reduction in the research in mean and 85th percentile speeds. It was 1 mile per hour, which I didn't think was a big deal, but Nate Drews told me that that's actually really good to get a 1 mile per hour 85th percentile reduction. No negative impacts. And then the crash reduction, again, they saw a reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes and no negative impacts. Additional areas of emphasis, you really want that speed differential between the speed limit and the school zone speed limit to be 5 to 10 miles per hour. That seems to be when they're most effective. Speed buffers on high-speed roadways, which is something you can't really find much in Minnesota, but Texas does these a lot, where it's 65 and then 45 and then 25 over the course of a mile. And then layering of additional countermeasures, which in the school zone guide is really safe routes to school. Go to safe routes to school. When you've worked with them, then come do your speed limit. So the conclusion, there's a positive yet modest impact on safety, and combined with additional speed management countermeasures for your best results. This document is ready. It's TRS 2301 on the MnDOT Research and Innovation website. Now, the boring topics, speed limits. No one ever really cares that much about these. So pretty much the same objectives. Are they effective? Can they reduce the severity of crashes? And then are there spillover effects? 20 states and about 150 communities in the United States have these. How they administer those programs varies. And then most use administrative citations so they don't go on your license. States, that is. So these crash reductions were very, very good, and the speed reductions. So speed reductions first. They saw up to a 15% reduction in mean speed, which is frankly kind of mind-blowing. And then on lower speed roads, the threshold speed where people are going more than 10 over, I think, they saw a 60 to 80% reduction. And then in school zones, 50 to 60% reduction in threshold speeds, which feels really important in a school zone to have, you know, fewer people going more than 10 over, and a 2 to 5 mile per hour reduction in mean speeds, which again, actually a very impressive number. This TRS is also out, and you can see some of the crash reduction numbers there. Fatal and serious injury crashes, a 20 to 56% reduction for something that's relatively cheap and not geometrics. That's a very, very impressive number. So basically, these are very good at reducing crashes and reducing speeds, especially K&A crashes. Spillover effects, mixed. One weird case in Arizona, they found spillover effects 20 miles per hour or 20 miles away on the same highway. How they determined they were related, I still don't know, but it was reported that way. And then we are continuing this, so we're making it more controversial now. We're going to look at commercial masking, enforcement, and administrative structure of automated speed enforcement or speed safety cameras in Minnesota, which I'm sure, again, nobody's really going to care about it. It'll just brush by. We made it. Done in time. Max, if you okay, if Max wants to come up, we can answer any questions. Joe, go ahead.
No, I don't know that we did. That's a great question.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, Rich. Definitely J-turn. Yep. So that one just has more side street volume than the other one. So there's more people coming to it. I don't think we've run into any other locations yet that we want to signalize. There's a lot of locations out there that would be slam dunks to have J-turns that don't need to be signalized. So I know the one in East Bethel has gone through several iterations since it's been out there. Some changes have been made to the signals to allowing right turns on red. So that one's been a little bit of a work in progress, I guess. So it's maybe not the exact model yet to base the other ones on, but I think it's still an option. Yeah.
Sure, what's the city, what are you gonna decide?
I guess I don't know how to start answering that question.
I can take a shot at it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Fine. So the question was, I think, kind of what are the criteria? What's the policy for installing J-turns? Most of it comes down to, well, two main things, HSIP. So if there's a fatal or serious injury crash at an intersection on a divided expressway, we encourage MnDOT districts or local agencies to submit for HSIP funding for a J-turn, because that's, again, one of the crashes that they're meant to prevent. And then I know Metro District has a policy of no longer allowing crossings, uncontrolled crossings on trunk highways. So they are, I think, no longer building those as reconstructions come through. The rest of them, I don't know if that J-turns are all that proactive, but they might be kind of based on an intersection control evaluation at this point. But we don't have a ton of concrete standards that I'm aware of. Mitch, to your question, there are a few more signalized J-turns that have been recommended in the county road safety plans that we've been wrapping up. But they're in the bigger counties like Scott. I think one is recommended in Sherburne. So there's some locations where they're probably appropriate, but we haven't seen any other ones where they've been seriously proposed at this point. I think so.
drivers were able to gas across the median. Either left turners blocking their view, passengers. And that leads to the question about the geometry of using at the main crossover, actually bending the left to where it goes, rather than offsetting an angle. So the driver making the left facing the threat coming down the main. And that would also have a U-turn, but then of course if you have a U-turn, you have to figure it out. By doing that, you also set yourself. Right now, the validated way of being built, it's really a head angle crossing.
Sure. I don't wait till this is done.
I noticed on one where put the base turns in, we moved the channelizing right leaving main. Having the channelized right leaving main line side would actually allow more usable gaps to the left turn. Because then that right turn.
Thank you, Denny.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense.
Yeah. For those online, Denny was talking about working at MnDOT in the 80s and his experience with uncontrolled divided intersections and geometric alternatives for J turns. So to the activation question, no, we have not considered that yet, but thank you for the idea. Yielding rates, not particularly. Sure. I guess the answer is no then. I've never thought about looking into that. Okay, thank you. Oh, who other questions? Joe, you already went. So the second one, I think I covered in my presentation. Don't put these on 5-lane roadways with a twiddle. I think they're a terrible application. If you're going to add a pedestrian refuge area, works way better that way. You know, you can put the RFB up, but then you're introducing, I think, at least 2 multiple threat crash possibilities. So that would be the one thing I'd really discourage. But if there's a refuge area in the median, I think that these could work a lot better. And then what was the first part again? I got so wrapped up in that answer. At this point, no, this was just an evaluation of the safety effects of their installation. Yeah, again, there's another cold fusion project. Sonia's working on a rewrite of a TEM chapter, everybody. She might recommend things someday. Yes.
So we've had that question a number of times. Is people on motorcyclists sometimes refer to them as cheese graters, thinking that if they hit them, they're going to be, you know, ripped apart. We have not really seen that. Looked at all the serious crashes, compared them to the roadways that did not have them. Didn't really have much of a difference. If a motorcyclist hits a guardrail or a concrete barrier, it's also not a good thing. Not saying that it's okay to hit a cable barrier instead of that, but yeah, we've heard that concern a lot, but we haven't really seen that played out on our roadways.
So we saw 300 or 400 serious crashes that involved a median barrier. I think there were 4 that were motorcycle crashes, and those all were, I think, the motorcyclists thrown over the barrier instead of.
Yeah, they weren't really any
they didn't go through the barrier.
Collision with the barrier themselves. Yeah.
Yes.
For people writing specs, did I understand, I mean, that's gonna have a category for RFBs on JPL? For product list?
Tanya says yes, and she'd be the expert on this one. So watch out, Tapco. Competitors are coming. All right.
That's all we have today. We'll see you next month, and I encourage you to look up the Great Lakes District meeting and the annual Portland meeting, and sign up for those too. Thank you.